and welcome to season 2 of Careers and Coffee, the show where I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Miss Lucy Grimwade, where we talk all things careers over a coffee. So first things first, Lucy, do you have your coffee at the ready?
Of course I do. Try to be a bit matchy today.
Oh, nice. I like that we've accessorised with the coffee cup. So this season, we are going to be joined by some special guests, which is a bit different to what we've done previously. We're going to be discussing with them about skills, experiences, and expertise. And then this topic that we're going to be covering today is going to be about transitioning away from your corporate career. I know it's a dream for many people out there. And actually, our guest has done this her very self. We are thrilled to be joined today by none other than Ms. Holly McCulloch. Holly has had a very varied career, from working in publishing to retail to management consulting and then back again. And 5 years ago, she left all of that behind her sensible corporate job, her words, not mine, to write books and bake cakes. So without further ado, welcome, Holly.
Hello, Holly. Welcome to Careers and Coffee.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, so welcome. So let's kick off by asking you about what you do now for a job.
Yes, so I have kind of two buckets. So I have my writing bucket. So I write women's fiction, broadly speaking, funny fiction. And then I also edit books as well. Mainly, again, women's fiction, but I do quite a lot of fantasy. And also some strange things come my way sometimes, but we don't need to mention those, probably safe.
Okay.
But yeah, as Charlotte said, before this, I actually had a super varied career. So I started off my life as an editorial assistant, as it turns out. So it's not completely unrelated to what I do now, but it turns out also that I wasn't very good at that. I would say that my attention to detail was severely lacking, which was a slight shame. But I love books, continue to love books. It was great for like getting free books. That was fantastic. But I decided in the end that actually it wasn't really for me. So then I moved on, and then I'm racing through my career right now, so you'll have a great time. So I moved on, and I actually became a book buyer for W.H. Smith travel books. So that was quite fun. Again, loads of free material from there, so that was really glorious. In fact, I've still probably got about 50% of those books I haven't read.
I was going to say, you must have a massive bookshelf of books from all of these jobs.
Yeah, and I was buying the books for the Harrods and Selfridges concessions, and so they would often have like really good picture books, like photography books.
Oh, nice. Good coffee table books.
Really good coffee table books. Very heavy.
Love a coffee table book.
Good for weighting things down, all that kind of stuff. But then I left that and became a management consultant. The jump from, you wouldn't think, but actually they all sort of fed into each other. And so I was management consultant for a number of years. Really enjoyed parts of it, actually, which, you know, if you consider that I do such a creative, job at the moment, you wouldn't necessarily think so. But it was very people-based, as Charlotte would be able to tell you. And there were also creative aspects in there as well, as long as you sort of concentrated on doing the creative things. And then I basically decided after 4.5 years that I would try and transition away from that. And so I then set up a cake baking business, cake decorating business, specializing in beautiful, I would say, very beautiful.
They were, I can attest to this.
Yeah,
they
like
also tasted amazing.
Yeah. And so that's what I kind of transitioned away to do. But I had a month sort of spare, and I wrote a book, or finished writing my book, and then got an agent, got a book deal, and so then just had this glorious time of eating cake whilst I was typing, and kind of occasionally having too much sugar, mainly enjoying it. And then COVID hit. The cakes went to the side. I picked up editorial work and continued writing, and here I am. Sorry, I really went extreme.
No, that was great.
Lovely. I was getting closer and closer to my screen.
Why are you doing this? Like, tell us more.
Holly.
So Holly, what was the name of your first published book, if you don't mind sharing with our audience?
Yes, it was called Just Friends, and it was, well, it is, it's still around, available via any good book dealer that you like, or, you know, less good. But it's no, it's very funny. I think it was very funny. It's very humorous.
It's very funny.
Yeah, women's fiction, although we don't need to go into the genre discussion right now, otherwise we will be here for a very long time and I will not talk about my career at all. But it was a lot of fun to write. I think people have a very romanticized view of what it's like to be an author, and I would have to say my first book was a delight to write, because I had absolutely no expectations, and I could just, you know, I wrote half of it. I think about half of it before I actually left my job. And so I was just doing it for fun. And that was lovely. And then the second book came out, and actually the second book, bizarrely, I wrote during COVID, if we can remember that strange time. Yeah, we can. And so that was quite a good distraction, actually. And again, I wrote that pretty quickly. I've written a series of other books since then, one of which will hopefully be published in 2025.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, really exciting. So that's really good. But it is like, you know, with any industry at the moment, I think it's quite tough out there at the moment. So it was really nice to have that editorial piece in the background to kind of fall back on when the writing goes a bit quiet. Yeah.
Holly, can I ask, what kind of things do you edit? Sorry, voice went then.
No. So I typically, it's always books. I always edit books, because that is what I do. It's funny, actually, because I've had this question before of, you know, what do you write? What do you edit? And I always say, oh, funny things. And people are often like, no, like, what is it? And I'm like, oh. And then, you know, it's like, which question is it? Is it the genre question? Is it the medium question, you know? So I write women's fiction books.
Yeah.
And I edit women's fiction books. I edit fantasy novels. I do a lot of, I've done a prison memoir. That was something.
Wow.
Yeah, that was, I don't quite know why that one came my way, but it did. And yeah, and so, you know, and I get it. A lot of the work that I do is freelance, in terms of the editorial work. So sometimes, depending on where I get that from, I can be a little bit more selective as to what I choose. And sometimes I can be a little less selective than what I choose. And realistically, when it's quiet time in the middle of summer and you come to me with your very thrilling business book, I will very happily do it. But in January, February, March, and then through October, November, December, if you have come at me with something that isn't my genre, I probably won't have time to be able to look at that. So it just, depends on.
Oh, Holly, I'm finding everything you're saying so fascinating and like loving. I'm like, I feel like again, like closer and closer to my screen.
So, Holly,
Great.
I guess
people fall asleep when they listen to me talk.
I find that hard to believe. So I guess it would be good to know, did you always know that you wanted to either be an author or work in the world of books and publishing? Because it feels like that's been the pull that you've had in your career.
Thank you, Charlotte. I would say I've got no idea what I want to do, even now. No,
okay.
No, obviously I've always loved books. I've loved reading them. I love writing. It doesn't even need to be a book. I love lists. I was one of those embarrassing kids who wrote a diary that I'm definitely not going to share. So I've always enjoyed reading and I've always enjoyed writing. Did I know I was going to become an author? Absolutely not, because it isn't. It's certainly, for me, it wasn't something that I ever thought that I would be able to make money off of. So, and even now, with the ups and downs, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And the number of authors who actually only write and make all of their money from writing is so small, percentage-wise, in comparison to the number of authors who write and have a job on the side.
Really? Wow, I had no idea.
No, it's ginormous. So I probably know. Ginormous, what a horrible word to use. But I probably know. Let's say I know 50 authors, and out of that, I would guesstimate 2, 3, 4 of them write full time. You know, so
Wow.
it's a really small number of authors who actually are earning enough money to sustain their life purely by books. And I'm just going to say it now, guys. If you buy a book, that's fabulous. If you've really enjoyed it, tell your friend to buy the book. Tell your friend to get the book from the library. Do not give that physical copy of that book to that friend. Let them, you know what I mean? We got to
Tells us, Lucy.
I know. I feel a bit.
I feel like guilty
I know.
of swapping
I
books.
know. No, the thing is that everyone is, and part of me, you know, the reader of me, I do it as well. And I understand the need to be like, oh, this book is so good, I've just finished it, you can read it. But the issue with that is that actually, you know, behind the scenes, that cuts out that author's royalties. So on a $7.99 book, we're earning 50p, not even. So, you know,
Wow.
the amount of, you know, but you don't have to buy a book. You can rent the books from the library, you can rent them on your Kindle, you can rent them through your Kindle app, you know. So actually, you know, you don't necessarily need to go out and buy every book that you want to buy because they are expensive. But you don't need to give them away to people either. You can just rent them from your library and get the royalties back as well.
Well,
I've
also
done.
though, sometimes if you lend somebody a book and then they don't return it, that's always an awkward conversation anyway.
Always. So we're saving you loads of awkward conversations now if you just keep your own books. Just like the only thing I would say is actually dead people, I don't mind if you share their books because their royalties aren't going into anyone alive, so it's fine. That's fine.
Holly, I'm so pleased that you've said about what it's like being an author, and when I told people I was writing a book, they're like, oh, you know, and they expect, because there's this like romantic concept that you're going to be sat in your lovely kind of log cabin, like writing a book, you know. And I just think, well, actually, I'm not even going to get paid for this. I only get paid like a tiny little percentage if anyone ever buys it. So it's yeah, thank you. But yeah, so I'm so chuffed that you've said that, because I've been trying to tell this to people for ages too.
No, I know, and it sounds really boring, and it is really boring, but it's always, you know, when you sneak into that, you know, behind the scenes and into a different world, you start learning different things, and you think, oh my goodness, like it never would have occurred to me.
Yeah.
But then actually it starts occurring to you, and you go, oh no,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that's terribly awkward. And also supporting your local libraries is so lovely because, you know, they're fantastic for more than just the books, you know. So anyway, big library supporter.
Yes, love that. So, Holly, what would you say would be, just from everything you've told us so far, which I'm clearly engrossed in, like right now, can you tell us what you think would be one of your kind of like lessons learned from your career thus far?
Okay, so can I have a practical side and then the more sort of non-practical?
Totally.
Wonderful.
That just
Okay.
summarizes Lucy and I. I'm practical, she's woo-woo.
There we go. Okay, so we'll go with the woo-woo, which I would think that's you know, focus on the bigger picture. But actually, I think that'd be my main thing, is that if you can, no matter what you're doing and no matter what position you're at the moment, if you can try to always keep the bigger picture in your mind, I think that's really important. And I think, you know, for example, when I was getting dissatisfied in my last proper job, sensible job, whatever word I used, it's still in the back of my mind, was sitting there, you know, I was going, this might not be what I want to be doing for the rest of my life, but at the moment it is enabling me to do X, Y, Z. And so, and you know, and no job is perfect, you know, even writing books is not perfect. So, but no job is fully bad either. So if you can try and take away the positives from whatever situation you're in, then I think actually whatever situation you're in, you'll be happier in for longer. And also, in addition to that, still saying on the more woo-woo side, is that I think there is a difference between your career, or there's a difference between a career and a job.
Yeah.
So your career to me is very much something that drives you and is very much part of your personality, and you know, it is something that you are really passionate about or should be passionate about. But it is okay if you do not have a career, if instead you have a job, and actually your job could be leading towards a career, or your job could be sustaining something that falls outside of the world of work. So it could be rescuing dogs or you know, I don't know, traveling, you know, whatever it is. But as long as no matter what you do, you think of that bigger picture and you go, well, what I'm doing at the moment is actually still working towards it, then I think that is very important and will lead you to a happier life. My main practical thing, actually two of them, I've got two of them. Number one, always be Charlotte's smiling.
I'm laughing not because of me, because I'm sorry, I'm going to share this with our audience. So Lucy does this thing where she goes, two things, and so when you said two things, that's why I'm laughing, because you and Lucy are quite alike in a lot of ways. I'm just starting to realise this from this conversation today. Sorry to interrupt and dive.
No, but we're all wonderful here. So two things. Number one, I think, especially if you work for yourself, but really anytime, but especially if you work for yourself, you need to make sure that you are very selfish with your time, because it is very easy for people, especially people who have sensible corporate jobs, to sit there and go, oh, well, you work freelance, you can do this, you can, you know, go food shopping in the middle of the day, you can blah, 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 blah. And actually, our time isn't free. Our time is probably more dear to us as a freelancer than it is in a corporate job. It is just that it is potentially a bit more flexible, and there is a stark difference with that. And so, yeah, that is something that I think you really need to be very, very wary of. And it is something that I'm still not very good at. You know, if someone's, I'm awful, I'm like a magpie. If someone's like, do you want to go for coffee? I'm like, yeah, I'm there anytime. I'm with you. Caffeine, you know, I got it. It's here. But it is very important. And I would say, again, it's more important to me now. My time is more important to me now, and the structure around it, than it ever was when I was working 9 to 5. Or realistically like 8 to 6, you know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And the other thing is money. So unfortunately, life is expensive. You have to live. Unless you are somehow gifted with a wonderful bank balance that someone else gave you, which I'm not, then you are going to need to have money. And so it's tricky having the one side of your brain that goes, especially in a creative career, that goes, this is what I really want to do. I really want to write books, and I really want to, or, you know, like beautiful things, paint, you know, whatever it is. But you will only be able to do that if you can sustain yourself on it. And so my last sensible job was very good because I was able to save a lot of money. And so probably sort of I burnt through that money that I saved within the first 2 years. Something like that. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but, you know, because I was still building up my freelance work, it takes a while, you know, and it took longer probably because of COVID, but it is going to always take a while no matter what you do. I know that there are a number of people also who will have that sensible job on the side. So that's when it goes back to being the difference between a job and a career. And it is absolutely okay to have a job that then sustains your career. And the final part of that is that also there's no shame in any job that you have that gives you money. You know what I mean? If you need that money, I mean, obviously there are some things you shouldn't do, like drug dealing and things like that. But you know, ignoring the illegal things, you know, it's again, it goes back to that bigger picture where you sit there and you go, this is what I want to be doing, and it's fine. I need to do this in order to sustain this.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Holly, all of that was great advice.
Oh, wasn't that fantastic advice? And just, Holly, when you were saying all of that, I was freelancing last year, and the amount of times people ask me to do things, but to do things for free as well. And I think, you know, everything that you said there was all the lessons I learned as well from last year, from my experience. And it was almost just like looking in the mirror. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's a really important message to kind of give people as well, especially if they're hiring freelancers too, is to understand that. So thank you for sharing that. Sorry, Charlotte.
No, not at all. I agree. And I think it's great advice. I mean, you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can explore it a bit further, Holly. What were the main motivations and drivers for you to go, actually, you know what, this corporate career is not for me, and I really want to, I'm at a point in my life now where I really want to explore more creativity, and you know, because we all have these kind of dreams about, oh, I want to go and do something else, or I don't want to work for somebody, or, you know, you have these ideas, but there must have been something, or you reached a kind of inflection point in your life where you're like, right, okay, now's the time. What motivated you at that point?
So I really think it was just a balance, and to say I was unhappy in my job isn't very fair, because actually it wasn't the job, it was me. It was I was doing something for a long period of time that actually wasn't fulfilling me. And I'm very much someone who, you know, people joke about crafting, you know, there's like, oh, crafting, little crafts. But actually, the reason why I think people find crafting so therapeutic is because you're doing something and you can see the result at the end of it. And my job before, I was doing things, but the result I couldn't see. Like, and so that, for my personality, was really difficult to be able to kind of do for a long time. And so I did it up to a point, and I just thought, you know, the balance of what I'm learning between what I'm actually taking away is uneven now. And so, you know, when I hit that balance, that's when I really started to plan an exit plan. And they were very good, actually, because when I told them what I wanted to do, I had a fantastically supportive boss who said, well, why don't you try going down to part-time? And that was glorious. Except for the fact that I was then, when the business started picking up outside, I was doing essentially 2 sort of full-time-ish jobs. So that was quite tricky. But I would say it wasn't necessarily that my job was dissatisfying me. It was that it just wasn't for me. It wasn't the thing.
Was it that it wasn't filling your cup, for want of a better phrase?
Yeah, and I think also, you know, when it was a job that you really had to be very dedicated to. If you wanted to be on the corporate ladder and you wanted to get promoted, you know, you needed to use all of your, certainly 95% of your mental capacity, doing that job, dedicated to that job. And wow, I knew that. Well, maybe not. I mean, 75, but for me, my brain was probably 90. And so, you know, in order to be able to do that, it was taking away from the things I really wanted to do. And so I thought, I was like, well, if I redirect all of this, you know, mental energy towards the thing that I actually want to do, you know, then what can you achieve? So that's kind of what I decided to do. And I had no interest in getting promoted. I didn't want to get promoted. I didn't want to have to sell projects. You know, that just isn't part of my personality. It's not what I wanted to do. So I knew that I was working on towards this career that just wasn't going to ever fulfill me. And so I just thought, you know, you have one life, you need to be able to try it. And so there we go.
Fantastic.
Out I shot. Very slowly, actually. I worked for longer than my notice period. I was like, I'll stay until you don't need me anymore.
I'm sure they were very grateful.
The more Holly talks, the more I feel like I'm very similar to you. I feel like you and I are going to become friends.
I have no doubt.
I was going to ask you, we were going to ask you about some of the challenges that you faced, but I think actually we've covered quite a lot of those challenges and those lessons learned. So I'm going to switch the question around a little bit and ask you about kind of future for you. So what are your plans kind of for this year? Do you have like a 5-year plan? I almost feel a bit sick saying that, because how can we have a 5-year plan nowadays, considering what the last 5 years have been, right? But if you get kind of where I'm getting at with this question here, what's your future plans?
So my future plan is, again, made up of buckets. Love a bucket. So career-wise, I've actually really enjoyed the editorial side of things. I don't do pernickety things, like I don't do spell check, I don't do grammar, I don't do anything like that. I do the bigger, always the bigger picture, but I always do the bigger picture, more constructive stuff. And actually that has been really fulfilling for me, because I do enjoy helping other people to find their own sort of narrative voice. I love that. I think that's great. I love telling stories. It's fantastic. So I would like to build that out a bit more, and make that into more of a constant stream, as opposed to at the moment it does flex up and down. So if I could do that, that'd be great. I would also love to expand on it a bit. So a lot of people will run, you know, writers retreats and things like that. I would love to do that. I have in my personal plan I have a desire to buy a house in Italy and do that up. This is quite a big plan. Yes, I can see everyone sort of laughing, and it is
Not laughing, admiring,
No,
impressed.
we were just talking about this last night about the Italian scheme that they have when you can buy a place for €1.
Yes, I probably wouldn't do that because I feel as though there's something dodgy going on there. But I do, yeah. So I used to study Italian at school. I picked it up again. So I'm really trying to build that out. And actually also learning a language is really fun for me because I used to have this crazy Italian teacher and she always used to love, what's it called? The etymology of words, where words come from. That could be the wrong word for the word, which would be ironic. Anyway, and so, learning all of that is always really, really interesting to me. And I think it's important to make sure that you're constantly challenging yourself. So the relearning of the Italian for me is a challenge. It's a personal challenge. I think it's great. I don't know if my Italian teacher thinks it's great, but, I'm not going to fill that in with an Italian swear word because I don't know any. But I would if I could. And then writing wise, so I don't want to go too into this because it's quite personal. But I'm writing a book at the moment, which is fantastic, and it's a rom-com, and I'm really thoroughly enjoy writing it. But I have been writing a passion project for a while now that is a slightly different genre, and that has been a real nice challenge for me because it's just been interesting to write a slightly different book, and so I'm hoping that will come to something. It might not. It might. It'd be fantastic if it did. Writing and anything creative is slightly odd, I think, as a career because everyone thinks that everyone expects sort of your first book to be as good as all of your others, whereas realistically, your first book is probably going to be the worst book that you write. So it's and you're thrust into this sort of world where it's like, oh my goodness, you've got your name on a book and it's amazing, and you go, after about 3 years, you're like, oh, did I write that sentence? Did I do that? That was awful. And so I think just writing itself as a career is always going to be challenging, especially if you kind of like keep going at it. And again, challenging yourself to write sort of different genres as well. So more of the same. I think when I get older, and it is different being in a creative field where you are not working, there's no promotion for me. There's no, oh, you're a writer and now you're a senior writer. It's just like, oh, well, you're an author and now you're just still an author. And so there's not that defined career path. So I think you need to make sure that you are looking at other things. So different genres. So working on your editorial skills, moving to a different country, So I think if you can, again, it's the bigger picture. So my 5-year plan is not going to be, I'm going to make a senior manager next year. My 5-year plan is I'm going to have written a completely different book in a completely different genre. And I'm going to run my first writer's retreat.
No baking on the horizon?
So the baking is interesting. So I am now only really doing baking for people who come to me.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. So and the reason behind that is, especially with something creative, it takes up so many different pockets of your brain. And the wedding industry is one that is fantastic to work in, but it is also very consuming. Everything that you do well, you sort of need to be really dedicated to it. And so, having stepped away from it, it's very difficult to do it sort of part-time. Although some people do it fantastically. I'm just not one of them. But you've either need to be in it or you need to be out of it. And the marketing funnel for that is so broad, so wide, in order to get those small number of cakes. And quite frankly, being really selfish, the majority of weddings that I was getting were in the middle of London in the middle of summer. And so, driving along those busy, very warm London streets with a cake in the back. Well, they never melted, which was really nice. But it's not my favorite thing to do. And so, do I miss doing the cakes? Yes, because the artistry behind them, the cake cut-offs, all those things I miss. I miss working with couples because those are fun. I miss coming up with the design concept, all that kind of stuff. But actually, I can get that that rush probably from a different thing. So, you know, I could, if I want to make a cake for myself, I can make a cake for myself and make it really
Do you
fancy.
still get joy from making it though? Like if it's just for yourself? Sorry, we've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but
no, it's fine. Yes, I do. I mean, I very rarely make a cake that I then eat and devour totally and completely for myself.
okay.
Although, I mean, who's to say no? But like, you know, like I did a wedding cake back in September. I did a birthday cake in October. I did a Christmas cake back in December. You know, so they are still there, but I just don't. It's not a revenue stream for me anymore, and so therefore I don't need to be super dedicated and trying to find people. However, if you need a cake, let me know and I'll see if I can make one for you.
Years ago, when Holly and I first met, she made me the best birthday cake I've ever had in my entire life. Nothing has ever topped it since. So, you know, the world is missing out on Holly's cakes, as frankly as my viewpoint on this. And it was beautiful, like the artistry and everything. I remember being sat in a meeting and we were eating this cake. I think actually there is a photo of this somewhere, which I will have to dig out for sure. Cakes aside, going back to thinking about transitioning away from your kind of corporate career, what advice would you give to anyone that thinks, you know, now's the time?
I would say just do it. Well, okay, I mean, don't have like, okay, but just do it is the big dream, right? That's the woo-woo part. If you actually have a desire to do something else, I think completely work towards. I think that's fantastic. Again, keeping in mind that umbrella, the bigger picture. Make sure you have a plan. You have to have a plan. Make sure it's sensible. Run it by more than just one person, because if that person is yourself, of course you're going to say yes. Of course it works because you know you want to leave. Run it by somebody who really doesn't want you to leave. Someone, you know, far more business minded than I am. I would also say that nothing is ever going to just fall into your lap. There's no situation where something is just going to magically happen, and you are going to find the absolute perfect experience on your first go. So if you actually want to go and do something creative, don't be worried if sometimes it isn't very fun, because, you know, especially with creative jobs and careers, people romanticize them, right? You know, people think that you do just sit in a log cabin with that, you know, beautiful roaring fire and maybe a dog and or a cat next to you, you know. But the reality of it is that's actually really, you know, it's not the case. I love my job, but I still have to do my taxes, you know. So don't think that actually, you know, you've left your corporate job and you're never going to have a corporate day again, because, you know, realistically you will. I think you also need to, one thing that I really miss and need to be better at, is building that community. If you are someone who has left a very corporate job, you are going to also be leaving that community. And going freelance in particular is a very solo thing to do. There are a lot of us out there, and it is getting easier to find people who are doing freelance work, especially with, you know, co-working spaces and things like that. But I would always try to make sure that you have that like support system around you. It might not be that you work together every day. It might not be that you work together at all. But you're always going to come up against questions or queries and things like that, issues. And realistically, you know, you're not the first person who's going to have left their corporate job to go and do something creative. There are going to be other people out there as well, and they're going to come across that same problem that you have. And so, you know, use them as a resource, whether that resource is for information or whether it's also, you know, just a little bit of, you know, I don't know, trying to feel less alone. So I guess those would be my main things. And again, also just make sure with the plan thing, make sure you've got enough money. Because otherwise your dream is going to die pretty quick. And as depressing as that is, you're in here hopefully for the long term. So whatever plan you have a bit of a buffer. Yeah.
I think that's great advice, Holly.
Fantastic advice. I'm just sat here like taking it all in, and I really hope that your audience, and if you're watching now and you've gone through your own kind of freelance journey too, I'd love to hear kind of your views too. So please like let us know in the comments of anything that that you've done when you've like transitioned into freelance, or anything that maybe you've learned from this episode today that you're going to take away this week, this year. So Holly, before we kind of wrap up towards the end, is there anything else you would like to share with us and our audience?
This goes against everything that I've just said. Nobody really knows what they're doing. I think everyone's just making it up as they go along. So, if something doesn't feel right to you, it probably isn't. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take other people too seriously. The other thing that I've really been trying to do, which I think everyone should do, is to reposition the way that you react to events. And what I mean by that is your brain is really, really powerful. Your brain can do a whole number of different things. I fully believe that if you are in a negative situation, if you react negatively to it, then the next situation that is negative, you will react negatively to it. If you're in a negative situation, you react positively to it, the chances are in the next negative situation you get, you've got more of a chance to react positively to it. I'm not saying that you need to smile all the time, because, you don't need to smile all the time. And I definitely am not the person who smiles all the time. But a fighting attitude, a go-getting attitude, I think is something that you can actually really try and build into your personality. I think especially if you're going freelance, you're going to need it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess that's my last piece of advice.
Yeah, really like that mind. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but that mindset shift. I think for the last few months, something that Charlotte and I have talked about is just, especially for me, going from like a bit of like it's happening to reacting differently and being like, okay, how can I turn this around, and just reframing it. And I know again that sounds very woo-woo, but you shouldn't surprise anyone now, because you all know I'm a bit woo-woo. But I have definitely gone through a journey where I've definitely switched and changed around just kind of my thought pattern. And I also really like that you said around not everybody knows what they're doing. People kind of just figuring it out as they go along. And I think that's a really important message to take away as well.
Just before we end, one last thing that I wanted to say. The other thing is that no problem is big enough to be worth worrying about that much.
Yeah.
So if you have an issue and you've got something that is keeping you up at night, solve the issue. Work to solve that issue. Apart from the fact that sleep is important, it also probably isn't as big of an issue as you think it is. And talking about it to people, and going back to that community thing, you actually probably realize that A, it's happened before, B, you're going to be able to get through it. It's not the end of the world. But again, that goes back into that mind shift of reframing, the problem or whatever it is that you're facing.
I agree. I think going back to the bit that you were saying about your reactions, I think also if you think and act positively, you attract. This is me being a bit woo-woo now, which is unusual, but you attract positive things. You guys, this is a dangerous combination. I'm declaring it to our entire audience now. But I think you attract positive things that come back to you. And and I also love the thing that you said about problem solving. As somebody who prides herself on being a natural problem solver, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Nothing's insurmountable, and 9 times out of 10 somebody else have experienced it. And I think to your point, having that community and that network, it really helps. And I certainly feel like I've experienced that a lot this past 12 months especially.
Thank you both. Thank you so much to the audience as well. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode today, and I hope all of you watching have as well. Please do let us know your thoughts in the comments. So I'm going to bring this session to a close now, and thank you to everyone that's joined us. If there is a topic that you would like for us to talk about, or maybe you'd like to be a guest because you have something that you'd like to talk about, please do send us an email, which you can see it scrolling down the bottom here on the ticker tape. So send us an email. It's careersandcoffeell, LinkedIn Lives @gmail.com, and Charlotte and I will pick that up. We also want to encourage you to go and check out our YouTube channel as well. So if you go to YouTube, search Careers and Coffee, we'll also be adding a link to this episode as well, so you can go and have a look. So you can watch all of season 1, you can watch our on-demand series, Tailoring Your Trajectory, and you can catch up all of the episodes that we do for season 2 as well. So please do go and find us on YouTube, Careers and Coffee. And it just leaves me to say, really, Holly, thank you again so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was fun.
And it's been a wonderful episode.
Great.
And we look forward to seeing you all, the audience, next week. Thanks everyone. Take care.